Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of RPG Horror Story Cringe. In today's episode, we have a tale about a dungeon master with a short fuse, a story about a player being punished for missing a D&D session, and much more. So sit back, heat up some leftovers, and let's get right into these stories.
Nah, you can't do that. This isn't Critical Role. By Reddit user, Overlord Pedro. Hey folks. I've been thinking for a while on how to construct this, but we'll see how this goes. A few years ago, I joined a D&D Discord community with a rather interesting concept, where people would make a character, get it verified by an admin, and then you look out on the DM notice board, where you sign up and then do your adventure with a bunch of people and gradually level up over time. I had done a few adventures prior and had a really good time, made some friends, and had some good sessions. I was still very new to D&D at the time, and I wasn't yet savvy with local groups, etc. This takes place just as my Dragonborn War Cleric hit level 2, and me and a few other players take up a job to investigate a goblin cave that is harassing a local village. The first thing I noticed about the DM was that he was very short-tempered, and didn't have patience with new players, and tried to hurry the group along with decisions. Eventually, after a rather rushed introduction, we reached the Goblin Cave, which, to our surprise, was crudely fortified, so we all huddled up and tried to decide on the best way to go about it. This went on for about 10 minutes, before a voice cut in.
Right, I'm going to the store, and I will be listening in. If you don't have a plan by the time we get back, I'll end the session and find another group who will.
And, on his word, the DM muted himself. Needless to say, the tension and awkwardness we all felt was really bad. So, under pressure, me and the new guys came up with a crude plan and thought, screw it. And here we go. As we mainly expected it was a trap, luckily due to me having a shield, as well as the other fighter and the speed of the monk, we managed to get through it. Eventually, we came upon this grand opening in the cave, where the goblins had this sort of altar guarded by these weird beasts. And so, combat ensued. We handled it pretty well. However, things turned a bit sour when I was one-on-one with one of these beasts. Those who know War Clerics know that we have the ability War Priest, which lets us use, up to our Wisdom mod, our bonus action as an extra attack.
How the fuck are you doing that?
The DM shouted. I calmly explained, though this didn't seem to pacify him, and he went as far as to get an admin in the chat to confirm what I was saying. Following this, he asked the staff to stay and keep an eye on me. I shrugged it off, and we got to the end of the dungeon, where we began to investigate the altar, to which this angel-like figure descended to face us and told us to forgive the wrongdoings of others in order for us to truly be enlightened. What? With everyone confused, I decided to inquire and ask that, with my acolyte background and time spent in temples, would I know who this angel represents? His response was as follows. DM.
Buddy, this ain't Critical Role. I don't know what you mean.
Me. I'm just trying to ask if my character's knowledge after spending time in temples and such, would I know what deity they represent? DM.
Look, you would have zero idea about this, so stop asking and just listen. This isn't Critical Role.
That was it. I just sat quietly and let him finish this huge-ass monologue about morals before the session ended. Usually, you stay behind and offer comments for the DMs, but I just left. I felt so put down by the encounter that I just had to leave the server. Luckily, I never gave up on D&D, and I have found far better people and had far better experiences. I'm glad I didn't give up, but holy crap, that's a real trial by fire. TLDR, join a D&D server and encounter a DM with very little patience and a short fuse, who belittles his players, before I end up leaving.
Yeah, OP made the right decision there, as that DM seemed like a huge asshole. And what made the DM think that asking that question was OP trying to make it Critical Role? What OP was doing was just role-playing. Thankfully, OP didn't give up on D&D after this experience. Let's move on. DM punishes me for my absence due to death in the family. By Reddit user OKCharity7922. This one does have a happy outcome, eventually. I think I remembered this one because it's the anniversary of my grandfather's death. This one has Kwaijin and Mage, from my previous stories, in it too. Anyway, the important cast in this is basically them and the DM, though there were at least one or two other people in the game. Either Mage or KJ gave me an invite to join DM's game. I wasn't really interested because my grandfather had died that morning, Thanksgiving Day. Mage then suggested that it would be a good distraction for me, and DM was okay with me joining. So they helped me quickly roll up a paladin, which I figured was a good idea, given that we were playing in Ravenloft. We get over to the DM's house, and I should note that this is my first time meeting him. He gives my character the once-over for approval, and says something like, "I guess your character is a 5-foot-tall, obese, elderly woman then?" It takes me a second, and then I explain that I was a little out of it while making the character, and focused mostly on the stats, etc., and not the descriptors at the top. I'm not sure if he was joking, and I just didn't get his humor because, again, I was out of it. But anyway, I fixed that part, and we go on. I don't recall much of the actual game, other than it was a fun distraction, and that when the session ended, our characters have arrived at a graveyard for whatever part of our mission. I warn everyone that I won't be able to come the next day because my family is dealing with a lot right now, and I have to babysit my young cousin while my stepdad and his sister make arrangements. I leave my character sheet with DM, not wanting to lose or forget it next time. I figure I'll just be hanging out in the NPC corner, or sometimes in Mage's games, another player would run an absent person's character. Cool, that's fine. Saturday afternoon, I go back to the game as we're going to have a mega session. I ask for my sheet, and DM says, "Don't worry about it." What? The game starts, and he tells me that I wake up at the bottom of a well. I'm basically naked, and have no equipment either. Again, I say, "What?" And I'm told that I missed the previous session, and he had to do something with me. I'm sorry, it wasn't like I just blew the session off because I was being a jackass, or had been a jackass during the game. I spend the first, I don't know how long, trying to get out of the well, and being told that I fail. I don't remember my rolls, but I'm damn sure they weren't all crap. After several rounds of trying to climb out of this damn well, something with tentacles comes out of the nasty water at the bottom of the well, and starts trying to attack me. Again, I have no armor and no weapons. I've been on and off trying to call out for the other members of the party on the off chance that they're close by, given that my character has no idea if they're even near the graveyard anymore. Finally, one of them passes a perception check to hear me. I think it was KJ. They come over, tie a rope at the top of the well, jump down, and give me a spare weapon so that we can kill the thing and then climb back out. I get my character sheet back, but I'm told to ignore all my weapon and armor bonuses for the time being. The rest of the session, we never find my weapons or clothes, and no one has anything to spare other than KJ's sword. If I hadn't card pooled with KJ and Mage, I would have left partway through, and I didn't show up to the rest of the sessions after that. The happy epilogue. Several years later, said DM is back in our area. He had been home from college during that game and was now graduated and back in town for good. I'm told he is offering to run a game for everyone, and I'm hesitant given what happened previously. However, I get a message from him apologizing for being an asshole to me and my character for missing a game session. He says he was being an overreacting, immature jackass, especially given what I was dealing with, and he completely understands why I would say screw it and not come back. I relent and go with KJ. At this point, we are married, saying that if DM pulls some shit, we will leave. Everything goes great, and DM becomes one of our regulars in rotation from then on. What that DM pulled was a super dick move. You would think that someone would be understanding about someone missing a session due to going through something like OP was. But, at least in the end, the DM realized how much of an asshole he was and apologized like an adult. Sometimes people just need some time to grow up, I guess. On to the next. Player doesn't understand. Point buy isn't about trust. By Reddit user Silas Marsh. I was gearing up to run a game where we were using point buy for character creation. Everyone was making their characters on their own and then bringing them to session 1. One player insisted that he wanted to roll for his stats. I told him no, we're doing point buy, but then he offered to record his rolls so I would know that they were legit. I pointed out that he could just re-roll while recording each time until he got results that he was happy with, but besides that, it has nothing to do with trust. We were using point buy so all the players would start on the same footing. When session 1 rolled around, he showed his character sheet to me. His stats were impossible with point buy, so I asked how he got them. He said he rolled, and that his friend, whom I didn't know and had never heard of, saw him roll, so I could trust that they were legit. I pointed out that, since I have no idea who his friend is, or if he even exists, saying that the friend saw the rolls meant literally nothing to me. I then reiterated that we were using point buy for balance, and that it has nothing to do with trusting the players. He then offered to redo his rolls in front of me. When it comes to character creation, rolling for stats can make for some interesting group dynamics, but there is always the chance that the dice gods can smite you. I personally agree with OP here that using point buy or even standard array is the best way to make sure that everyone starts out a little more balanced. Though this player just couldn't seem to understand that, and no matter how many times OP gave him his reasoning, talking to this player was like talking to a brick wall. A brick wall that just wants to roll for stats. And before we get into the next one, here is some Simba ASMR.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Ah, so relaxing. Now let's get into the story. One dude manages to be all different types of problem player. By Reddit user Little Goblino Mino. For about 2 or 3 years, I was a forever DM for a somewhat changing, but pretty steady core group of players from my school. There was Barbarian, an amazing character writer and role player, Rogue, a fun player and a great friend, and Sorcerer, somehow was every archetype of problem player. We had lots of fun over the years, but God did that Sorcerer get on my nerves. Sorcerer would metagame constantly. If I threw in a monster or even a symbol, he would know it immediately and tell the whole party what it was and what it meant. I distinctly remember having planned a future encounter with mind flayers by letting the players notice a few rats with their brain exposed. It was just supposed to be unsettling and would lead into the eventual introduction of the villains. Sorcerer, whose character has never heard of a mind flayer or a cranium rat, the rat brain thing from a D&D book, immediately screams, "Cranium rats! The mind flayers are here!" That annoyed me for a little while, and I, being a new DM, just decided to retcon it. Sorcerer was also a massive power gamer, going as far as to Google optimization for his broken sorcerer. I ended up having to scale all the combat to his extremely powerful character, despite the fact that the 4 other player characters in that campaign hadn't really cared for optimization, so they had no fun in combat. What else? Oh, he had no cares about roleplay. While the other characters were telling interesting stories, he literally wrote no backstory, had no personality, and just wanted to kill everything. And that's the big one. He was a massive murder hobo. Any NPC the group met, no matter how friendly, Sorcerer would instantly want to kill them, and needed constant talking down from the rest of the party. The biggest offense I can think of was when we took a break from D&D and played an X-Files type supernatural government mystery story. The 3 players had escaped from a holding cell and were dashing through a secure science and military base. They encountered weird alien creatures that were locked up and had a lot of fun exploring the area. Sorcerer had stolen a machine gun from a guard that the group had knocked out, and he began to fire it off at the non-combatant desk workers and scientists in the facility.
The worst of that session was when he described being on an elevator with an innocent man and said,
"I shoved my gun in his mouth,"
as the rest of us listened, totally appalled. He was also just an asshole in the other things that we did, but that's not a story for here. Anyways, this power gamer, edgelord, metagamer, murder hobo moved away, and our games have been much better off for it.
Well, that player definitely was almost every flavor of that guy, huh? Makes you wonder how OP and the group managed to put up with him for so long. But at least it sounds like they no longer have to. And if you have a story that you would like to be shared on the channel, be sure to post it to the D&D Doge subreddit, and who knows, it may just end up in a future video. Much like the last story of the day. So, let's get into it.
Player gets mad they can't use a SANIC OC in a fantasy-type D&D campaign. Submitted to the D&D Doge subreddit by Reddit user Snoofy24. So, I haven't played a whole lot of D&D. I just started about 3 or 4 months ago. I don't have any interesting stories to tell, but this one happened when I very first started playing. I was at my school's D&D club for the first time, and we were all making our character sheets with the help of 2 experienced players. I already had a character in mind, so I was easily able to make it onto a sheet using D&D Beyond. I asked if I could help some of the other people struggling to make their sheets, and one of the experienced players told me to go for it. As I'm helping some of my friends make their sheets, I overhear one kid talking about how they're going to play as a SANIC OC from a Friday Night Funkin' mod.
What the hell is that? Roblox. Ah, this is making much more sense now.
I wanted to tell them that it was probably a bad idea, but I'd never talked to this guy before, and I didn't want to come off as rude. I tell our DM, and he says that he'll sort it out, so I feel a bit relieved. Though by next week, the dude is still wanting to play the same character, so I'm not sure if the DM even mentioned anything. By the time our D&D club meets again, it had apparently been decided that we'd split the club up into 2 groups, which was great because there were somewhere around 20 people there originally. The dude with the SANIC character isn't in my group, which I was pretty glad about, since our groups had a decent sized set of fairly unique characters that fit the time era quite well. I wasn't aware until the end of the meeting, but apparently a lot of not so good stuff was going down at the other table, including that one player's character, which did not fit into a fantasy setting at all. The other table's DM asked that player to try making a new character that would fit into a fantasy setting, or to at least try to make the character he was currently playing fit into the world better. Then, the player throws one of the most immature tantrums that I've ever seen, yelling and throwing his chair, saying that he should be able to be whatever he wants, and that the DM should just deal with it. Now, I agree that the player should be able to make a character that they enjoy playing, but I also believe that it should be one that can reasonably fit into the world that your DM provides, and shouldn't take away from the immersion of the story. Thankfully, he quit before the next week, as did several other players. There's about 8 to 10 people now, which is hard to manage as one group, but at least the majority of them are respectful and kind to one another. I have to agree with OP here. You should be able to make a character that you would like to play in a tabletop RPG, but it's a two-way street. You gotta make sure that your character fits within the world that the DM is creating. Though, with the whole SANIC and Roblox thing, I can kinda tell the age range of the people involved in this. And it's a little more forgivable, seeing how the SANIC player and the others are probably in their early teens. We were all that age once, and we've all done stuff that we look back on and cringe at the thought of. And I'm sure that 10 years down the line, SANIC player will do the same thing when thinking back on this. Well, hopefully. And that is all we have for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope you all had a fantastic Thanksgiving. Until next time.